Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Weiland with the MBTA. While we're waiting for more people to join, I just want to make sure everyone is in the right room. This is room 3 is the Boston and Brookline room. There was the name on there was incorrect. I apologize about that. So if you are interested, I believe it was Waltham, Belmont, Newton. That is in fact a different room, and you'd have to leave the room and then go back into the other one. I apologize about that. Just wanted to flag that for people, and I'm going to give a couple more minutes to get sorted. Thank you. And I just want to make sure everyone is in the right room. This is the Brookline and Boston room, not the Waltham, Belmont, Newton room. That's another room. So if you did want that one, you'll have to leave and join the other room. I apologize about that. Give one more minute. So thank you everyone for coming today. I believe that I should be sharing my presentation with all of you. I am a service planner here at the MBTA, and I'm going to be presenting about Boston and Brookline. Again, if you did not hear me earlier, the tags were mislabeled. So this room is for Boston, Brookline. If you're interested in Waltham and Newton, and I believe Needham, that's another room. So you'll have to leave and then come back in. So if you also, if at any point you want to leave and come back in, that's totally fine. And to go to another breakout group. When you get back into the main group, you should use chat because you'll be muted in that group as you come back into them. So for a summary of the changes in the Boston and Brookline area, there are a bunch of routes that did not change since the May proposal. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we can talk about them in the question and answer period if you would like. And there are several that did not actually change the routing, but did change the frequency or span. So just quickly, those are Route 52, which goes from West Roxbury to Watertown via Newton. It changed to weekday only service. The 504, which is an express from Watertown by way of Newton Corner, added midday service. And the SL2 was promoted to high frequency service 7 days a week. So those are the kind of non-map changes. Now I'm going to start diving into the map changes. There are a lot in Boston, so I'm going to be relatively quick, but we can come back to them hopefully during the question and answer period. So first, Route 11. This is one we have heard that the connection to the medical center was very important to folks in South Boston. So we are extending the 11 to Nealon Street, providing that two-way service through the New England Medical Center. As Doug mentioned earlier, it is not being designed right now to go to downtown and then back down A Street, but we'll be providing that two-way service through the hospital. Route 7 is not one that's being changed from the spring proposal, but we've heard a lot of concern about how we showed Route 7. I also should say this is my bus route, so I understand the concerns that people have here. I want to assure everyone that there is no desire or plan to run the 7 on First Street to Summer Street all the time. Rather, just like today, in order to supply as much service as possible, we'll run outbound 7s on First Street during the AM peak. So therefore, the route will go just like it does today, or as in the spring, it was proposed to be shifted down to Farragut from P, but otherwise, we'll be running on Broadway in the peak direction towards downtown in the morning and back out in the evening. It's only using that First Street connection, just like today, in the direction that doesn't have demand in order to make the turns as quickly as possible so we can supply as much service as possible. So I want to assure people that this is not a plan to move all service to First Street by any means. Getting back into the things that did change, we heard a lot about accessing the Boston Medical Center was important. So we adjusted some routes to go through the BMC. For example, for the T12, this means that it'll run on Mass Ave rather than on Melnia Cass. And for the 12, we also heard that accessing Nubian was really important. So we're proposing to do that. That means that it'll cut over to the orange line at Roxbury Crossing rather than on Melnia to Ruggles. Likewise, we heard a desire to access the center of the BMC on the 8. So we moved it from going all the way down Albany Street to the Concord and Newton Street pairs internal to the hospital area. So the stops that the buses usually serve as they do today. There's construction on Newton Street, but once that's over, that stop will be reestablished. Likewise, on the 42, we moved it from going all the way down Albany to Concord and Newton Streets internal to the hospital area. So this concern really came from our operators, not necessarily from the public at large. After we did our initial proposal in the spring, we did a lot of engagement before then and afterwards with our internal team too. And they were really concerned about the lengths of some of the routes. So for example, the T15 that we had proposed all the way to Oak Square was one of the most commonly cited as a one-way length of about 10 miles and about 85 minutes, which is a really long time to sit on a bus without being able to use the facilities. So because of that, the Route 65 corridor on its own doesn't appear to have as much demand in terms of origin destination pairs or existing ridership for high frequency service. So in order to meet our budget, we reduced the proposed frequency on the 65 corridor and made that connection over to Ruggles, and we continued the T15 connection up to Ruggles as a high frequency corridor. For the 19, we had proposed to run the 19 on Humboldt, but we heard significant desire to have a direct connection between Fields Corner and Warren Street, especially for school. So we have reestablished the existing 19 routing on Warren Street. That means that the 19 no longer runs on Humboldt Ave, so we have shuffled things around a bit and reestablished much of the Route 44, though only from Jackson to Nubian, and highlight that there are many connections from Nubian to Roxbury Crossing and Ruggles that the existing 44 has, that this proposal does not. We also heard a desire to restore the routing of Route 14 from Roslindale to Nubian Square. Part of the change from the spring in doing that is the routing will be on Warren Street instead of the current Blue Hill Avenue. Because this new version of the 14 doesn't run on Heath Street as the 14 does today, and so we proposed in the spring no service on Heath Street. We heard a lot of desire to serve that corridor, especially to Nubian and BMC. So therefore, we're proposing a version of Route 41 that connects Heath Street to Nubian to the BMC to JFK. The current 41 routing into Jamaica Plain will be provided by a proposal from the spring of Route 39. Because we're proposing to move the 14 back to Warren, we're also proposing to reestablish the 45 to serve the Blue Hill and Dudley Street corridor that we had proposed the 14 to be in. Moving down to Southern Dorchester, we had proposed to create a single bidirectional route that operates around this neighborhood, but heard feedback that folks wanted us to stick with the existing 201 and 202. So that's what we've proposed here. These operate as one-way loops through southeastern Dorchester, just like they do today. As part of that same package, we had proposed to flip the ends of the 210 and the 215 coming up from Quincy, so that the 210 went into Ashmont and the 215 went to Fields Corner. With the change to the 20, going back to the 201, 202, and some feedback, we decided to flip those back to being the way that they are today. So the Route 210, we had proposed it going over to Ashmont. Now we're proposing it to go to Fields Corner as it does today. And likewise, the 215, we had proposed for it to go up to Fields Corner, and we're reverting that to end at Ashmont as it does today. Civil order. West of Ashmont, we had proposed to make a straight route from Mattapan to Fields Corner, but folks had pushed back against that, desiring the existing 26 loop routing. So we've moved back to that. Route 17, which we had not actually proposed to have in the spring, there was a desire to reestablish this route, especially to maintain service on Boston Street, which had been eliminated in the spring version. So the 17 brings that service back. Route 18, in the draft map, we took Dot Ave straight through from Ashmont all the way up to Andrew, and we're restoring, that meant that it did not hit Fields Corner Station proper, and currently the 18 does a loop around Auckland Street to serve front door service to elderly housing there, and so we are restoring those loops off of Dot Ave. The proposal for it to hook down around to JFK is still part of this proposal. For Route 29, which we had proposed to go from the Frankwood Field Apartments over to Ashmont, we got the feedback that folks wanted the connection up to the Orange Line at Jackson Square and down to Mattapan. So we are restoring that service. Note that because it is a much longer route, it is being proposed as midday only service. So for the T39, in the spring, this was a proposal to combine the 39 and 47 as a new crosstown route from Forest Hills to Cambridge and Somerville. This is a long route that brought some pause to operations staff, and we heard a lot of feedback that desired the existing routing of the 39, so we have restored that. In order to maintain some of the northern end of the Springs route, T39, we're creating a version of the existing Route 47 as a high frequency route, the T47. We also heard a lot of folks didn't like that the spring map did not include a direct connection between Cambridge and Ruggles for the connection to Northeastern. So this restores that. It doesn't do the connection to the Porter that had been proposed in the spring, largely due to concerns that operations staff have about the space that we have because of having so many routes ending at Porter. And therefore, we're proposing to end it up by Union Square, providing a crosstown connection to the Green Line there. For the 55, we had proposed a variant of it that started in the LMA and went through the Fenway and then up to Kendall. We heard a lot of comments requesting to go back to the existing 55, which we have restored. As Doug said, we have not proposed to restore the connection all the way down to Park Street, however. As we do so, by making that connection, we lost the crosstown connection that we had proposed with the 55. So we created a new version of Route 85, which runs from Ruggles through the LMA to Kendall and on to Somerville. And this is just showing the northern end of that route as well as it goes up to Assembly. Next, for Route 60, in further analysis that we did, we found that it took too much time to travel through both stops in the Dedham Mall in both directions. So we've adjusted the routes not to enter. Folks who want to get into the Dedham Mall will be able to transfer to the 24 in Dedham Square. For Route 60, we have decided to end the route at the Chestnut Hill Mall instead of Newton Center as it does today. It's rather, it ends at the Chestnut Hall, it ends at Chestnut Hill Mall today, and we've decided to continue that. For Route 64, we've heard a lot of desire to continue serving the Brook Street and Soldier Field Road area in Alston Brighton instead of new service on Faneuil Street. So we have restored that service. We're also not showing routing anymore through West Station, as that's likely outside of our 5-year horizon. When that does get instituted, we will look again at how best to serve that section. Moving to East Boston, the T104 has been rerouted to Airport Station instead of Wood Island, which provides a direct trip to the airport. And it's also on Spruce Street, which has a closer connection to the Market Basket that folks desired. The 112, we are extending to Maverick Square to provide a Blue Line connection for folks in this service area, and it replaces today's 114. For the 120, we've revised routing near Suffolk Downs and Orient Heights for better legibility, and there were some impermissible turns that we weren't necessarily going to be able to get past. So it also is extended to the Winthrop Public Landing parking lot, which has a connection to the ferry and allows a better route terminus for our operators. The Route 354 is one that just grazes Boston in Sullivan, but it creates a new connection that we think is really important from Assembly to Sullivan up to Chelsea that does not exist today. And finally, the Route 354, we've restored a direct express route from Woburn to downtown, which is peak only and 30 minutes or better. And I think those are all of them. I'm amazed that we got through so quickly, frankly. But I'm sure that you have questions of more detail to dive into. So for question and answers, if you would like to ask, please click participants and then raise your hand. If you are on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing the star button and then 9. You can also use the chat button to submit a type question or comment. It's not open to everyone to read, but if you direct a question to ask a question, we'll receive the comment or question. And then after you speak, we will lower your hand and you'll be muted to allow us to respond and provide opportunities for others to participate. I believe Doug, who is with us, who is our main presenter in the first part of the meeting, will moderate the questions. We also have Shalini Sen, I believe, who is another planner in the service planning group, who does a lot of the more western routes of the city. So take it away, Doug.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We also can bring up the interactive route map and look at it that way if that's convenient for folks. I know those slides showed what we had proposed back in May versus what we have now, and sometimes it can be difficult to parse out sort of what's happening there. So we'll leave this slide up for a moment so that folks know how to ask questions. You can raise your hand or you can post in the chat. For folks who raise their hand, you will be listed in the order that you raised your hand, so I'll just call on folks in order. And if you're joining us on a telephone, you can press star 9 and that will raise your hand and I'll call on you. So we can start with Diane Smith. You can unmute yourself. Yep.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I have 3 questions about bus line number 7. Currently, the number 7 bus goes up to Franklin Street and Otis Streets. And I was never quite sure from your May proposal where it was going. Is it still going to Otis and Franklin Street, which is important for people who go to Mass General Hospital appointments downtown and Spalding Rehab appointments downtown, and who work there and also who have to go to the courthouse. So my first question is, where is it going up Otis Street anymore? And if not, what is the closest street to downtown it is going to go to?
So I can take that. The city of Boston is running a plan right now that is looking at bus priority through downtown. And that plan has not finished or even gotten particularly far in terms of selecting a particular route, as far as I know. So where there are bus facilities for us to be able to efficiently move through downtown is where we will put the service. My guess is that it wouldn't be Otis and Summer, simply because it would be very difficult to run bidirectional service in that area. And they're very small streets. I understand what you're saying about a desire for a connection to downtown crossing.
So who would I contact, or who do I write to find out what's going on with bus number 7?
So for that plan, I would recommend contacting the Boston Transportation Department for the exact routing through downtown.
Is there anybody in particular?
I can find the project website for that process, and I can post a link in the chat to it.
Okay.
I think they had a public meeting a few months ago.
Yeah.
Okay, my second question had to do, what about having a number 7 bus run on Sundays? At least a few times a day. There's no bus on on Sundays.
I don't have the exact number in front of me, but all along part of the proposal was to extend it to be a high frequency route 7 days a week. I mean, it wouldn't be as high frequency on Saturday and Sunday as during the week, but it's a 7-day route now, is the proposal.
Okay, my third and last question, which you don't have to answer if you want to put it in the chat. I really couldn't follow when you were saying sometimes the buses would be on First Street and sometimes they wouldn't. So could you explain it in chat so other people can ask questions?
So just really quickly, because I know this is a big thing that people have had a lot of concern about. Right now, today, if you were to ride it this morning, it runs on First Street while it's going to City Point, because no one or very few people are on the bus coming out in the AM peak. So it would continue to do that just like today. But in the direction that people are actually traveling, it would be running on Broadway. And then during off-peak times, when we don't have as much demand, it would be running in both directions on Broadway.
So say I go to work at 9 o'clock. Is the bus going up First Street or is it going up Broadway?
It's going up Broadway, and then while you're not on the bus, in order to make the bus come back to going northbound again as quickly as possible, it goes on First Street. That's all.
Okay. That's all.
So we can try and put out some sort of more information about this, because but I want to get.
It's not clear, but somebody else probably needs to ask a question now, not just me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Diane. And I'll post a link in the chat, but the project that the city of Boston is leading is called the North Station to Seaport Multimodal Corridor. So that's looking at creating a series of bus lanes through downtown to connect North Station and South Station and the Seaport. So the intent would be for this Route 7 to use the corridor that they select from that process. But I can post a link in the chat as well.
Thanks, sir.
Yep. Kennedy Avery, you're next. You may be able to unmute yourself already. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. My name's Kennedy. I'm here on behalf of Councilor Box Office. I have one comment and a few questions. So first of all, I just wanted to thank the Bus Network Redesign team, Josh and Doug. There's been a massive amount of work that went into both the design and engagement processes for the draft map and the revised map. So I just want to recognize all that work and thank you for that. My questions, I was wondering around the implementation of the network changes. So you listed kind of divided buckets of restoration of routes, rerouting, routes that were added, frequency and span changes, and then routes that were taken away. Are those buckets, do they neatly fit into the phases 1 through 5? So could the restoration of routes be all expected in the summer of 2023, etc.? And then in terms of comments to the bus network redesign team or the bus transformation office, I was curious to know if the revised map and changes are all malleable, or where these comments are funneling into, or the purpose of those. And then finally, I was wondering about your engagement strategy when it comes to implementation of letting people know that the hours have increased and the route is back, in regards specifically to the restoration of routes. And I'm thinking specifically of the 55 bus. Thank you.
Great questions. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll try my best to answer all of them. To the question about sort of the malleability of this proposal, we do acknowledge that there will be things that will change between what we have proposed now and what ultimately is implemented over the next 5 years. Roadway conditions will change. There's going to be construction projects that influence bus routing. We haven't identified every bus stop location yet, so that will have an influence on it. New developments are going to be built over the next 5 years, and that will have an impact on what the road network looks like, where bus stops and transit priority can go. So there will be some changes that happen to the network over that period. And the feedback that we get from folks now, the comments that they submit through the online feedback form, will help inform the implementation team, the bus transformation office, as they go through this process. In terms of what will be done first or how it will be phased, that's something that we are working to figure out right now. We're working on an implementation plan for this. For the routes that we said were basically restored, those routes are functioning today. They may have less frequency than what we're proposing in the future, but the routing, for the most part, it does still exist today. So we would likely, as we increase our operator headcount, do our best to get routes up to the frequency that they had pre-pandemic, in addition to making the other changes in the network. Ultimately, we want, at year 5, we would have this new network in place with, those small changes that I mentioned. But each year we'll have to implement changes sort of in packages, because changes to some routes are going to influence other routes. So it's going to have to be in sort of groups of routes at a time. Right now, we anticipate trying to focus the biggest and most immediate changes in places that don't have high frequency service today. So I mentioned some of those communities earlier in the presentation, but places like Chelsea, Malden, Medford, Everett, Lynn, Roxbury, Dorchester, some on the South Shore, etc. So there are places that don't have high frequency service today, and those are possibly where we would focus increasing service as we go through this phasing, but it will be heavily dependent on our operator headcount and our ability to increase the number of operators that we have year after year as we go through that timeline.
Doug, I'm going to cut you off just because we only
Please.
have about 7 minutes left, and we have several hands up, and I know you can talk about this for 20 hours if we were asked to. So if we could limit to one question, and then if we have time, we'll come back around going forward. Thank you,
Kennedy. Hopefully that covered mostly everything. All right, Luis Baxter. You should be able.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I came in a little bit late because I went to the wrong thing, and I missed your thing on T12.
I think Josh can go to that slide. Yeah,
So can you see my slide?
I can. Yeah.
Okay, so very quickly, for 12, we had a lot of comments saying that there was a desire to connect it into the BMC, and so the change is moving it from Melnia Cass over to Mass Ave. So it will abut the BMC, and then there was also a lot of desire to have this connection for folks coming up directly from Nubian rather than having to walk all the way over to Melnia Cass to get this great new connection into the job center of the seaport. So we brought it down to Nubian, and then that means that it's going to Roxbury Crossing rather than Ruggles and on into Brookline.
Yeah, and it's going to the seaport, right?
Yep, yeah, that part's the same. Sorry, excuse me.
It's still going down D Street to the seaport.
Down D Street to the seaport. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Kelly.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So my questions are for like the 7-Eleven bus, and I'm like Diane, who spoke earlier, like I think we're both a little confused at your response that you gave for this route. The map just doesn't look clear, and either does the 11 bus. Like I'm still uncertain of like where the 11 is going to end, because it's just a little confusing.
So the 11 here, let me, if I, are you able to still see my screen, or was I just presenting the?
Nope, I can see your screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the, so the 11, and I encourage you, if you're able to play around with this, and I apologize that everything is kind of the same color, which is a little annoying, but so the 11 is proposed to cross over on the Berkeley Street Bridge, 4th Street Bridge, and then come up Washington to, this is inbound, right? Yeah, to to Neyland Street, and then turn back around in Harrison and come back down.
So I took the 11 bus last night, and like the route that it was showing me in my map was not the route that it takes. So it's not consistent, the 11 bus, first of all, and it's also not like on the same time frame as like the 7 bus. So having these options living in Southie, basing the fact that like if you look at our lines that are around the corner at like L Street and Broadway, it's insanity. So I don't know if like this 11 bus is now being cut down on timing of, and now not even bringing us into downtown, and the 7 bus is like this being increased. Sorry, there's a lot of questions being increased on like getting people into downtown, into the area that they need to go.
Yep, I understand. So again, as Doug talked about, there's a lot of issues of getting enough operators to be able to run as much service as we're proposing. But to be clear, the service that's being proposed for the 7 is more than is being supplied today.
Okay.
So that should be that should be becoming more efficient, especially with bus lanes, because a lot of the problem, this is a tangent and I apologize with 3 minutes, but a lot of the problem is with the bunching that we get on the 7. And so getting the bus facilities to be able to make that run more regularly should be helping a lot of that situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, Allison.
Oh, thank you. An overall question related to Mission Hill. Several of the routes are now going to go from Roxbury Crossing to the LMA, and trying to understand the increase in the number of buses that will be traveling on Tremont Street and what the route is that they're going to use to the LMA. I know last spring there was a promise of a separate meeting just to talk about Longwood Medical Area routes, and that didn't happen. So I'm hoping there's more clarity around that. And just really fast, these maps are useful, and I hope there are going to be versions online that people can print if they need to. Thank you.
They are online, and there's a PDF version that's printable as well, so it's not as like selecting A and B to find it. The Longwood Medical area is still under consideration. Those meetings haven't happened yet because the decisions haven't happened yet. So that's still a process that the city and Masco, or the new name, I forget, and Brookline and the MBTA and DCR are all having conversations, and that will be a process going forward. That's one of the reasons that probably some of the earlier phase stuff are not going to be the things going through the LMA, because we have to figure that out. So I don't have answers to those questions. There's also, I should say, some plans for extending the Columbus Ave bus lanes further up Tremont Street, which should make that more efficient. So.
Okay, thanks.
I will say the time in the breakout rooms is going to be extended by 5 minutes, so we'll be here till 7:25. All right, Mela. Mela, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, I have a couple of questions about well, I put in chat to state what's happening with the 14 and 28, and also the 18 seems to have been slowed down, like to a crawl, and there's a major housing development over there with, I mean, I don't know how many units are being built, and how is did the MBTA coordinate some of these new changes, because same thing that seems to be going on with the 14 not increasing to the level that it should have been, with all of the new housing development that's going to happen again in 18. So that, and is the 28 bus going to go to Ruggles, or why this whole LMA focus on sending the 28 to there? I didn't hear if that got changed back to going through Ruggles, or if you still intend to make people get off and take a train one stop over on the busiest route in the system. Okay, those are my 3 questions.
Do you want to take this, Doug, or should I?
Sure. Thank you, Mela. So the 28, as we're showing it, would continue to it continued as we had it in the proposal. So it would not go to Ruggles. It connects to the Orange Line at Roxbury Crossing. So it goes up Warren and then into Nubian, and then to Roxbury Crossing, and then into the LMA. A big part of the changes that we were making in the network were trying to connect more places to the LMA because of the number of jobs that are there, and also because of folks needing to get to appointments at all the hospitals there. So sort of both of those reasons. So the 28 would connect to the Orange Line at Roxbury Crossing. And then
why couldn't it go down Ruggles Street to get to LMA, you know, and go through Ruggles? I know that's a busy street, but you know, let people get to Ruggles, which was a lot of people's destination, coming from school, Northeastern, connecting to the commuter rail and all of that. And now they have to get off of their one seat, one ride, and have to change to a different mode, which is going to cost more money. And they have to do a step-up transfer, so it's a ferry fee.
So for whether it will be on Ruggles Street or not, we are looking at the routing through the Longwood Medical area to see exactly where buses should run and like where stops will be and where layover space will be. We know that the LMA is a really challenging area traffic-wise. A lot of the streets are really congested, so we're going to be working with the Longwood Collective, that's what the Masco is called now, as well as the cities of Boston and the town of Brookline, to figure out exactly what the routing through the LMA should look like. And it will be to some extent dependent on where we can get transit priority for buses so that they're not bogged down in congestion. So to the question that we got earlier about sort of the malleability of the network, the LMA is one area where the exact path of travel for buses, what exact roadway they're on in the LMA may change from what we are showing in this proposal, depending on the planning processes that are going on and the conversations that will be had between all of those agencies in the coming months. So there's that sort of TBD. We're going to end up going back to the main room in 1 minute. So I want to go to Sasha. You can unmute yourself now. We'll try to get through the last couple questions. Sasha, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, I'm going to move to Daniel Rasaby for now. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for your work on this project. I live in South JP and commute to Kendall. And so I was really looking forward to the new 1-seat ride, but I guess that's not coming. One of the things I notice all the time on the 39, which I take frequently, is that it's stuck in traffic that's bumper to bumper.